Hi guys, this is Cookie Does Stuff. Welcome to my tutorial for Snowy Mountain Hanayo, and also at the end there'll be a quick brief rundown of Snowy Mountain Nico. It's not going to be as descriptive as Hanayo because I ran out of time and I didn't get time to film anything for Nico, but there is a brief explanation at the end on how I made that. So I thought I would start by breaking down the different pieces that I need to make. So you can see here that the cosplay has a few different pieces to it. First of all, we've got a hat, we've got a capelet, there is a shirt / dress and skirt. I will be making this not as a dress but as a shirt and a skirt separately because it's easier for me to do it that way. There's a faux corset, there's these glove things, and there's these leg tubes, which I will not be making because I don't have enough fabric for those. So, I'm going to go ahead and skip to the pattern for the capelet now. Okay, so what I've got here is the base for the capelet. As you can see, it looks pretty similar to a circle skirt. What I've got marked here is the fold of the fabric, so this part here is cut on the fold. The difference between a regular circle skirt and what I've got here is that you can see that this part, it's not super accurately drawn, but this is not a complete circle. What I'm doing instead is I'm taking my bodice sloper pattern, so the back has a neckline like this, and the front has a neckline like this, which is a little bit deeper, and I'm combining those two to make this pattern. So this neck hole matches up to an actual bodice neck hole, not a perfect circle. So in reality, your shoulder would be about here. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the center front from the front, and you'll find when you match up your neck holes like this to make this pattern that the center front will not line up to the fold, which is perfectly fine. That's how you want it to be. So in order to find where you need to measure out the rest of the circle from, you need to go from the shoulder. You want to mark where that point is, you want to find the center back and mark that point, and you want to find the center front and mark that point. And they will intersect to make your center point in which you can measure this outer layer from. And the length of this will depend on how long you want your capelet to be. Mine is about 45 centimeters. Once you've got your basic pattern, what you'll want to do is separate it into the different sections. So as you can see here, there's a black section that goes here, then there's this red section, and then you've got the rest of it. So what you want to do is you want to first of all split into the black section, because this red section lines up with it. So you'll want to figure out how far you want that to be, and you want to split it like so. And don't forget to add seam allowances and such when you do this. The easiest way to do this is to cut this section from your main fabric, and then when you cut this section from it, add your seam allowance, but take it away from the black section. And then use this piece of fabric to make your pattern on the black fabric, but make sure you add in this extra allowance here and then add in your seam allowance. And then once you've done that, you can do the same thing, but for this red section. Don't worry too much about this top section right here yet. Just worry about this part. The fabric that I used for the black was a bit sheer, so I did have to double layer that, and you will see that when I'm sewing that I based those two layers together first. But the order you'll want to sew is you'll want to sew these two together first, and then you'll want to sew this line. And then once you've done that, you can add a collar to it. I have a pattern for a collar that matches up to my bodice sloper neck holes, so I will be just using that collar to make the collar for this pattern, and I won't be worrying about the fleece just yet. The fleece will be added in a little bit later. Okay, so on to the time lapses. So here you can see I'm basting together the two layers of black fabric so that it's a little more opaque. then I went ahead and added the small red rectangle sections to the front of the black section, and I sewed both of those on. And don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and end of all of your stitches. Now I'm adding it to the main part of the capelet, and I'm just going along the edge of the inside of the circle. And I did have a little bit of trouble fitting these together, so I did have to take in the black section a little bit. I think because of the different biases in fabric, it didn't quite fit together properly. Now I'm just marking where I'm going to roll hem the front, and I'm just going ahead and doing that, and I'm sewing that down. Make sure everything's nice and clean and finished. So now what I'm doing is I'm sewing a just plain line of stitching all the way around so that I can cut my fringe up to there and it won't fray anymore. Now I'm sewing the collar, and it's just 2 pieces that I sew together and then flipped inside out, attaching the collar to the main part of the capelet. And then I go ahead and I trim that seam and I zigzag that seam again so that that seam will not fray, which I believe is what I am doing here. And now to finish the capelet for now, I'm just cutting up to that seam, that line of stitching that I did earlier, just so that I can make that fringe. Here's how it's looking so far. And if you noticed in the time lapse, I encountered a problem where when I was sewing this panel to the main section, it for some reason wasn't matching properly, probably because of the different fabric types, and probably cut them on different bias because I just wasn't paying attention. So I had to take in the back a little bit in order to make it match, which means this doesn't quite connect anymore. Like, I can get the 2 collar parts to connect if I really try. I can't do it with one hand, but that's fine, because I'll only be really wearing this for photos anyway, and it's only technically supposed to have, like, it's not supposed to connect the 2 collar parts. It's supposed to be touching, but I don't think it's actually supposed to latch or anything. I think the actual latching mechanism is supposed to be the lines of beads that go across here, so that's fine, that'll keep the cape on. The next part I'll be working on is the shirt and the skirt, and I'm not going to bother drawing patterns for these because they're fairly simple. This shirt will just be a regular shirt. It'll cut across, it'll have some darts in it according to my bodice sloper pattern, it'll have some straps, and in the back I will be adding a shirring panel, and I'll show you guys how to do that as well. And then the skirt will just be a basic rectangular skirt, which is just a rectangle which is then gathered in to make a skirt. And then I will be adding trim to that, and I will also show you that process. So I've patterned all of my pieces, and I thought I would just quickly show them because I'm gonna cut everything all out and I'm basically just gonna sweep through sewing everything. So I've got my bodice, which I just used my bodice sloper pattern, and I've been meaning to do this for a while, make an actual like strapless pattern. So I basically traced my bodice pattern, traced the top of Cyber, because that is a neckline that I know I want to use for this. And then for the back, I did the same thing, but then I cut a separate panel from it, and I took the darts out of it to make a shirring panel, which, this is my shirred panel, and as you can see I'll be adding an inch to the side of it to make it big enough so that it has that like stretch to it. I don't want to make it too big because usually when I sell cosplays it's to people who are a little smaller than me, so I like to have things basically just fit me, and then that means that it fits other people a little bit better. So I've got the bodice sorted out, and then I also patterned my leg and my arm cuff things, and it was really easy to do that. I just duct taped my arm and duct taped my leg, drew the pattern on, cut it out, and I gave myself a little bit extra because I have a feeling I taped it a little bit too tight, and because I'm not using a stretch fabric, so I did give it a little bit of extra allowance on it, and then I will take it in if need be. So that's what I have at the moment. I'm going to cut all this out. I will probably also cut out my skirt at the same time. I might cut out my my faux corset just because it's basically just this pattern but cut across a little bit more. So I guess I will get to cutting and sewing. So my darts are quite large. They go in and then they go out again and then they go in again. Whoops. So this is, I believe this is the biggest part of my bust, and then this is my underbust here, and then it tapers out to my stomach. So what I usually do is I cut notches, checking that that's on camera, I cut notches through both layers off my, because my fabric's still fold, this is the fold here. I cut notches where the top dart starts, and then what I do is I take my pins and I stick them through the points on my outfit, on my darts, and you can see there's holes in the pattern. Oh, actually this one's new, so it doesn't have a, usually there's a big hole in the pattern from doing this so often. And I stick them all the way in so that they don't wiggle, and then I flip it over and I make sure that this is the wrong side, so this is the inside of my shirt, so it's okay to mark this. And then I take, where have I put it? I'm really prepared. You know what, I'll do this. Okay, oh no, it's right here. I take my white gel pen because this is dark fabric, and honestly I have no idea where my tailor's chalk is. You should probably use tailor's chalk for this, but I just don't know where it's gone. So I just mark little crisscrosses where the dart is, and I like to do crosses as opposed to like a dot or just a line, so that I really have the pinpoint, and it's always going to be like a teeny tiny, like half a millimeter off, but that's fine. It's close enough to work. So I do that on the back, and then I've got my notches at the top to mark where the top of the dart is, and then I flip it over and I take all of the other pins out, and then I just lift the bottom of the pattern and work my way up. So I find the first pin, I mark it, I take that pin out, I work up to the next ones, I mark them, I take those ones out, and then there's one more, I lift it, I mark it, and I take it out. Apologies for the lighting, I've tried my best to make it not so dark. I'll probably edit it a little bit in post. So I've got my lines all marked out and even spacing, a little bit of space at top and bottom for hemming. I'm going to be using this stitch here, if I can get it to focus. There we go. This stitch here, number 7. I believe that this is technically a blind hem stitch. If you don't have this stitch, I believe you can use the large zigzag, or you can use one of the other methods for shirring. There's a few different ways that you can shirr. The way I like to do it is I like to zigzag over the thread while I'm holding it. You can also wind the thread manually onto the bobbin and do it that way, but I am nervous that I'm going to make it too tight. So what I do, I'm not going to be able to film and record at this, film and stitch at the same time. It's going to be tricky with one hand. So basically I've got my stitch, I need to put it on the right one, and I take my thread and I line it up with, I wonder if you can see this, I line it up with this middle little thing on there, and basically when I'm stitching it'll stitch, it'll go boop boop and then one over, boop boop and then one over. I'll stitch a little bit and then I will come back and show you how it looks. Okay, so I've done a line of stitching. As you can see, here's the line of stitching here,
along the line. I've missed the line a little tiny bit, but that's fine, as long as you get close to it. So it goes stitch, 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 and then it goes boop, boop. So that up and down zigzag secures the elastic thread, and you want to make sure to backstitch at the top at the beginning, and you want to make sure that you leave yourself quite a lot of extra thread and quite a lot of extra elastic thread at either end. The reason you want to do this is because when you finish putting all of these lines in, you'll want to go along and tie the end of each of them on one side, and then they'll all get pulled and tied on the other side. So you want to make sure you've got that extra length for tying it. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch the rest of these lines now. Put this back on the tripod so that you can watch the time lapse, and then I will show you how to turn this into a actual elasticated panel. So here you can see I'm just sewing the lines off shirring as I previously explained. Skipped ahead a little bit because it was a very long time lapse. Now I'm just tying off all of the ends of the thread. Make sure that you tie them really nice and tight. I tied mine several times each, which took a very long time to do. Okay, so I've got all of my elastic thread zigzagged in. You probably saw in the time lapse that I fucked up a few times and missed a couple stitches, but that's fine. The vast majority of it is sewn right, so that's fine. Then I went and I knotted all of the ends. Make sure you knot them really good and secure, because otherwise they will pop open when you're wearing the outfit. It's happened to me before. You would think that sewing a line of stitching across when you add it to the other pieces would fix the problem, but nope, still does it. So make sure that's really good and secure. The next thing you want to do is take your thread tangle hell, tidy it up a little bit, and you want to do this like a couple at a time. Take the elastic threads, separate them from your actual like sewing thread. I usually do it like 2 or 3 at a time, and then you just want to hold them like this and just push down on the fabric and pull. And when you stop being able to pull, that's the fabric telling you that you need to move the gathers along a little bit. So you just sort of spread them out, and then you can pull some more, spread it out a little more, pull some more, spread it out a little more, and you just want to keep doing that until you get to a point where you can take your pattern. And this pattern, you know, this is before I added the excess to it, so I knew that this is how big it needs to stretch to fit me. And you want to just make sure that it stretches. This is half of it, so I'm just eyeballing it. You want to make sure that it stretches big enough that it fits you. And then it's nice and simple. Just tie your ends off. Make sure they're good and tied well. Trim them, and repeat the process for all of them. So here you can see the finished shirt panel, and now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attach this to the back panels on both sides. So I'm just pinning it right now and then sewing it on. And I also zigzag all of these seams afterwards as well off camera, and then I go ahead and add the other side, so both sides of the shirt panel are sewn down. And now I'm connecting the already darted front panel to the back panel, giving that a few pins, and sewing the front and back together. So now what I'm doing is I'm pinning a roll hem along the entire top, and I also do the same for the bottom, and just sewing that down so that both edges are nice and clean and finished. More sewing. This is the bottom end. Now you can see I'm just trying on the fit. Fits pretty well, pretty happy with it, just need some straps to keep it up. Here are the straps, just a couple pieces of fabric sewn together. I trim them,
and flip them inside out. I use a pencil to do this. I find it's easiest to just have one end that's sewn, or in this case folded, and use that to push the pencil against in order to flip it the right way around. And I do this for both of them. You can see it's quite puffy at the moment, so I go ahead and iron. You can see the difference here between the non-ironed and the iron stripes.
I'm going to be using a rectangular skirt, not a circle skirt. And I was going to make it a little bigger than I did, but I actually ran out of fabric. What I do is I basically fold the fabric in half when it's about, you know, like this is half the width of the bolt, which is about the right size for a Love Light skirt. This probably wouldn't work for a longer skirt. You would probably need to use the entire bolt. But basically I just fold it in half and I just measure out the size, the width of my waist. And then so once I cut that off and I cut down the fold, that gives me 2 times my my waist for the skirt. You probably want to do closer to like 2.5 times or 3 times your waist, but like I said, I actually ran out of fabric and I don't want to have to go buy more. But yeah, so it's just literally just the bolt, fold in half and then cut down the center. So that's how I do that, and then I will just sew each end of it, hem the bottom, put an elastic channel on the top, and then add all the trims and stuff. Really easy. Hey guys, so there's a few things that I had to skip over because Mondays and Tuesdays I don't film with voice because my flatmate's home and I have anxiety and I don't want to film while she's here because I'm awkward. So I thought I would explain some of the things that I skipped over. I did film some of them, so you might have seen some of the footage previously, or I might put it in after this or during this while I'm explaining it. Who knows? We'll see what future Crystal does. First thing I did was I finished the skirt. So the skirt now has its elastic installed, which, as I explained earlier, I just folded it over and then folded it again. I did the trim off the skirt, which is fairly easy. It's, I actually happen to already have these ribbons already here. So, as you can see, it's just a gold ribbon with a blue ribbon on top of it, and then a red ribbon in the middle, which I zigzagged over because I was too lazy to put 2 lines of it. I think I will, if I get time, I will paint the flowers onto the red trim, but otherwise I don't know if I'm going to actually get time before the event this weekend, and maybe I'll do it after this weekend and put the footage in at the end, who knows. So that's the skirt basically done. Next I finished, except for the trims on it, the capelet. So the capelet just needs its flower buttons and beads on it now. So what I've done to the capelet that since last time is I hot glued on this like sequin trim that I found in my room, and I also satin stitched the dashes on it, and then I added the fur to the top. I basically, well, the fleece to the top. The way I did the fleece is just the exact same way you would do bias tape. So if you're wanting to know, I did it the same way on everything that I did. So if you're wanting to know how to put the fleece trim onto everything, just look up how to do bias tape. I did it the exact same way. So that's the capelet. I made a hat, which I did not completely fleece line because, like I explained earlier, it is going to be warm, but it is lined just for ease of dealing with the seams. I didn't want to have to deal with all of the seams in this. So this is fairly easy. I'll put up some pictures of the pattern that I used here. I literally just eyeballed a pattern, made a mock-up, trimmed it to where it needed to be, and basically drew directly onto it while it was on my head where I wanted the ear flaps and everything to be. So I'll show you the pattern pieces. The ears are literally just triangles that I sewed the wrong way around. As you can see, they're shiny and the rest of it is not. I messed that up. I just literally cut some slits into the top and sewed it on the inside. I just sewed a straight line across, which is why they're a little tiny bit puckered, but for a quick, easy costume, I'm not too worried. And then again, it's got the exact same thing on the inside, just without the ears. And then I just edged it with the fleece. So that's the hat, nice and easy. I finished the bodice. I can't remember if I showed it or not last time. All I had left to do last time was put the panels together, basically. All the darts were in and everything, so I put the panels all together, including the shirred panel, and I added some straps, and I just hemmed it on both edges, the top and bottom. So that was nice and easy. There wasn't much left to do on that. I didn't make leg cuffs because it turns out I did not have enough fabric, and I won't be making them for Nico either because, again, I realized I do not have enough fabric. I messed up a bit. But I made the arm cuffs, so I think I already recorded, I think I did record the making of the pattern. So I literally just made these from that pattern. I added a zip going from the wrist to halfway up, just so I can get it on, because as you can see, it doesn't get past the widest part of my hand. So it just has a zip on it, and it just, I won't show it on camera because it's hard to do with one arm, but yeah, and then I just added trim to the edge like I did on everything else. This one's come loose a little bit. I need to hand stitch this one down. Ignore that. So that's the cuffs. And the last thing I did, which I don't think I filmed any of this, so I should probably explain it properly. I might film it for Nico and put that footage in here. We'll see what order things get done in. But I'll explain it anyway. So this was fairly easy. I made it from the same pattern as I made the shirt, but with the exception that I did not replace the panel in the back with shirring. I just put a zip down the center back instead, as you can see, just so I can get it on and off easier. I was intending to put a shirred panel in it, but I don't have the time, and shirring takes quite a long time. So it just goes to my bust. It's got darts in it. There's a dart here, and no, wait, is that dart? No, that's the side. The dart in the front got turned into, it just happened to be where I wanted to open the thing up, but it does have the darts in the back still visible. So the front, I just sort of eyeballed it and I opened up the front of it. I just never, when I cut it, I cut down the center front and then I just hemmed it to where I wanted it to be. And then I just lined up these and just sewed them straight down. I didn't want to put eyelets or anything, and I don't have time for that. And then the bottom of it, I used a scallop stitch that my machine has. I'll put in some footage of that. So I just scallop stitched, fray checked, and trimmed by hand. So that's all of that done. Fairly easy, and then the top is just roll hemmed. So that's everything that I have missed. The things I still have left to do is I need to add the teardrops to the faux corset. I need to add the flowers to the skirt, and I need to add the crisscross to the hat. And then I just have to add the little flower beads and the strings of beads to the capelet, and then I believe it's finished. So here's the finished cosplay. I ended up not having any little beads, so I used loopy lace for the capelet. As you can see, I added all the things that I said I was going to add. I'm overall okay, happy with this outfit. It could be better, but for 2 outfits in 4 days, I think it's okay. Here's the finished Snowy Mountain Nico cosplay. I didn't have time to film any of this because I ran out of time for making, so I was going pretty quickly. So I'm going to quickly explain how I made everything. Most of this is pretty similar to how I made Hanayo, so a lot of it's just repeats. So for the headband, fairly simple. I just satin stitch a layer of lace to either side, and it's just bobby pinned on either side. I didn't make earmuffs because it's summer and fuck that. My very pretty model wife, very pretty. The shirt is just a basic shirt with sleeves, and it's got fleece, again like on Hanayo. I put it on as if it was bias, so it's got that on either side, and on the neckline, burp, burp, burp. I didn't open it at the front because I want it to be nice and tidy on the front, and I didn't want to try and put like a discreet closure on the front, so instead Instead I just put a zip. Ignore how badly I didn't do any hand sewing to take anything down because I didn't have time. So instead it's just got a zip in the back, and as you can see it's got a couple of darts and a center back seam where the zip goes in. The detail here was an absolute nightmare to put on. I just sort of pinned it and satin stitched along the edges, and that just goes to the seam here. I should have, in hindsight, just opened the seam and put it in, but I didn't have time to unpick and re-sew that seam. But if you're making this, I would suggest just putting the trim on before you sew the front and back together and just having it finish in the seam. For the button things, I didn't have any white buttons, so I just put a couple dabs of paint. I need to put an extra layer on them, but like I said, didn't have time. And then the flower detail, I just nail polish painted some flowers that I bought from the dollar store. I didn't have any beads, so I used sequins for the beads. So that's the shirt, and as you can see, it's got darts on either side. So the faux corset was made the same way as the Hanayo one was. As you can see, it's got some lacing in the front, and ignore the tummy tuck here. I ran out of fabric, so this shirt's about 5 centimeters shorter than it should be. So it's just got, this is just 2 pieces of fabric, you know, folded like sewn like a pillowcase essentially. And then I just lined up these and sewed them all at once. The bottom has scalloping, which as you can see on my sewing machine, that's number 10. Is a default stitch that I have. So that's what that is, and then it's just fray checked and cut, and then I just painted the little petals on, and as you can see in the back, it just has a Velcro closure. And then the skirt's pretty simple, just a rectangular skirt, same as Hanayo. It's got ribbon sewn on, Q-tip painting, and then fleece. And then the second layer, which they're both attached to the same layer, as you can see. The bottom layer just has a red stripe sewn onto it. And for the last part, I made these little, like, arm corset-y things for the gloves. And again, they're just a piece that's sewn sort of like a pillowcase. It's sewn down permanently on one side to this bottom layer, and then the ribbon is sewn down permanently, and then it's got a Velcro closure. So that's all of Snowy Mountain Nico. As you can see, I did not make the legged tubes, just like I didn't for Hanayo, because I ran out of fabric for both of them. But I'm fairly okay with how the rest of it came out. Very cute. Okay, thank you for watching, and I'm sorry that this tutorial was so rushed and bad, but I did both of these in a week, which isn't my usual style. Usually I would give myself a little more time, so future cosplays won't be so rushed in tutorial form. But thank you for watching, and please subscribe and stay tuned for more. I will be making another Nico Christmas cosplay for the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye!